Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan Lugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Tuesday, August 8th. Jaguars' first unofficial depth chart has been released. We will dive into it ahead of the Jaguars' preseason Week 1 matchup with the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas, Saturday, August 12th at 5 p.m. This is going to be fluid. Let's just say that, right? The depth chart this early on in training camp, in the preseason, it's going to be fluid. It's going to change. I think you usually see rookies buried a little bit on the depth chart. They'll have a chance through the rest of training camp and preseason to rise up and claim spots on the roster, certainly. But we'll dive into all of it here. If you're enjoying the content here on Duval Daily, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you want to, you can also support the channel further by checking out genjag.com/shop. You can pick up some new Duval gear. We've got our tie-dye limited edition Duval throwbacks available right now for pre-order. Again, that's genjag.com/shop. Really appreciate y'all for tuning in. So let's dive into this depth chart, starting off with the starters. Only surprise in the starting lineup. Only one surprise, really. It's Blake Hance at left guard, and that's really only the situation right now because Tyler Shatley dealt with the AFib situation last week, and he's working himself back into the lineup. He's still participating in practice on an individual basis, not in the team portion of practice. I think he will be able to work himself back, and if he was healthy right now, he would be in the starting lineup. Now, Ben Barch also working his way back at left guard. It's possible that he would be the starter if he was fully healthy. He's working back from the knee injury he sustained in Week 5 of the 2022 regular season. Still hasn't been fully cleared to participate in practice. So you do have guys there that, if they were fully healthy, and they are expected to be fully healthy at some point prior to the start of the regular season, they would probably be penciled in as the starters for Week 1 at left guard. But as things currently stand with the Jaguars' injury situation at guard, Blake Hance is listed as the starting left guard for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Everything else is really pretty much chalky. And again, he's only there due to injury. So listed as the starting left tackle, Walker Little. I don't think that's a surprise because that's what you've seen so far in training camp, right? With Cam Robinson being the number 2 left tackle. I still feel strongly, despite both guys really having strong camps so far, that will change after Cam Robinson returns from suspension. They're going to want to get their best 5 on the field. They haven't talked about Cam Robinson playing guard at all. They have talked about Walker Little playing guard quite extensively, and they have experimented with Cam Robinson out there in the starting lineup at left tackle and Walker Little out there at left guard. I believe the Jaguars are going to try that lineup once Week 4 is over and Cam Robinson can return from his suspension. I really strongly do believe that. So I think it'll be Cam at left tackle, Walker Little at left guard, Fortner at center, obviously Brandon Sheriff at right guard, and then the rookie, the only rookie in the starting lineup, but we knew he was going to be in the starting lineup, Anton Harrison at right tackle for the Jaguars. So I think that's going to be your starting 5. I think behind that, you'll have Shatley on the interior. You'll have Ben Barch on the interior as well. So I think you'll have some good interior depth. You obviously have Josh Wells out there at tackle as well as some insurance. So I think you feel like you've got 3 quality tackles at the very least. Josh Wells is a guy who has stepped in spots when he's been needed and been able to perform at a reasonably high level at tackle. So I think you feel pretty good about that spot, again, once Cam Robinson does return. You've also seen Cole Van Lannon take some reps out there this year, a guy who can play interior or at tackle. But getting into some other notable spots here, Kevin Austin is listed as the number 2X behind Calvin Ridley, which is significant because Kevin Austin, rookie undrafted free agent in 2022, wasn't able to make the roster because, quite frankly, he struggled with catching the football. He's been much more consistent in that regard this year. Still not perfect, as I've mentioned. You've seen a couple passes thrown his way that have hit the ground, but a lot more explosive plays down the field for Kevin Austin in training camp. So I think it's going to be really interesting, and we've talked about it here on the channel if you've been paying attention. The wide receiver spot is going to be interesting. Teams usually keep 6 receivers. If the Jaguars do in fact keep 6 receivers, obviously it's going to be Calvin Ridley. Obviously you also have Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Jamal Agnew as your top 4. And then if it's 6, 5 and 6, I think, is interesting. For me, I think Parker Washington should be a lock. You drafted him for a reason. He's a guy that probably should have been a day 2 pick. Everything he's shown you so far in training camp has been positive. He's made some unbelievable catches. He looks physical. He looks tough. He adds value as a special teamer. And then you've also got Tim Jones, who's listed behind Zay Jones for the number 2 wide receiver spot on the other side. I think Tim Jones is a guy that probably deserves to make this roster. He doesn't drop anything. He does the dirty work. You've seen him get in there in games, block his ass off, compete on special teams at a really high level. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And now you see Kevin Austin starting to emerge as well. How will that wide receiver room play out? If you had to base it off this current depth chart, it would look like Kevin Austin would be on the team and Parker Washington would be on the outside looking in. I doubt that's how it ends up playing out because I do think the draft value matters. I think the ability to play special teams at a high level matters. I think Parker gives you more in that regard than Kevin Austin does. And I just think overall, yeah, Kevin Austin might be a more explosive outside receiver, a guy that can create explosive plays down the field. But Parker Washington is going to be a much more consistent slot type receiver in this league than Kevin Austin is as an outside receiver. I think if you were to try to get Parker Washington on your practice squad, he would undoubtedly be scooped up by another team, and you would lose out on a very talented slot receiver that you could potentially long-term rely on very heavily. Are you going to be paying Christian Kirk $18 million per year for the foreseeable future when you've got Parker Washington? And I'm not trying to write Christian Kirk off. He's an unbelievable slot receiver. I think the Jaguars should have him in their plans for the next couple years at least. But at some point, you're probably going to want to get cheaper at that spot. You're probably going to want to pay a guy like Calvin Ridley, right? Instead of forking out all your wide receiver money on Christian Kirk. I'm just being real about this. I think Christian Kirk's a great player, a great leader. I want to see him in Jacksonville. But when it comes down to brass tacks, I think eventually you're not going to be wanting to pay your slot receiver as much as you're currently paying Christian Kirk. I think Parker Washington is a good answer to that long term. So I do not think the Jaguars will end up trying to stash Parker Washington on the practice squad. I think he will end up making the roster. But again, if you look at the depth chart right now, he looks like he's the 7th receiver. We'll see how it plays out. Tank Bigsby, number 2 on the running back depth chart. Not a big surprise for me at all because he's clearly been... if you just look at training camp, he's been the most impressive back in the Jaguars backfield. Now, we know what Travis Etienne brings to the table on Sundays, right? He is an unbelievably explosive runner, has tremendous speed, creativity with the ball in his hands. He's going to be your number 1. I think Tank Bigsby, though, is going to start eating into some of those carries. I think he's going to get some inside zone looks. I think he's going to get some goal line looks at times because he's just a tough, hard-nosed runner like the name Tank, it is fitting for him, but he's a tank with incredible speed and agility and explosiveness as well. So a really fun player. I think you have a really good running back room. Behind Bigsby, you've got Jermichael Hasty, then Dearness Johnson at 4, and I think the Jaguars will probably keep 4 running backs, which would mean Snoop Connor and Quadri Allison on the outside looking in. That doesn't come as any surprise to me right now. Looking at the tight ends, no big surprises here. Garrett Prince listed as the number 2 F tight end behind Evan Ingram. That's kind of your move tight end, your receiving tight end, if you will. And then Brenton Strange listed as the number 2 Y tight end behind Luke Farrell, who the Jaguars really, really like. I do think by the end of the season, Brenton Strange will have probably accumulated more reps than Luke Farrell overall, just because I think he's more talented overall, but Farrell has experience in this system. He's a very talented Y tight end in his own right, in my opinion, a guy that can block at a fairly high level, but also bring a little bit to the table as a receiver. I just think Brenton Strange has a little bit more of a ceiling than Luke Farrell does, a little bit higher of a ceiling than Luke Farrell does, I should say. So, and I think Strange and Farrell, Prince, Evan Ingram, they've all looked very good in training camp so far. Garrett Prince has been a touchdown machine. No big surprises here. I do think, though, Brenton Strange has a chance at some point to overtake Farrell as the top Y tight end in 2023. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, no surprises in the starting lineup, right? You do have Henry Mondo ahead of Raymond Vohasek as the number 2 nose tackle behind Devon Hamilton. Mondo is a guy they brought over in free agency. He's had a role on the Giants and Patriots in recent years. Vohasek is the rookie out of North Carolina who had an unbelievable day of production yesterday, having multiple tackles in the backfield. He has an incredible bull rush. He is very, very strong. I would be surprised, honestly, unless Mondo really starts to make his presence felt, if Vohasek actually doesn't overtake Mondo in that role as the number 2 nose tackle. You've got Adam Gotsis ahead of Tyler Lacey behind Roy Robertson Harris as the number 2 defensive end on that side. So that doesn't come as a big surprise to me. I think both of those guys will end up making the roster. I think Gotsis is a very impactful guy in terms of the ability to create disruption in the backfield. And I think Tyler Lacey, the Jaguars drafted him in the 4th round for a reason. He's not going anywhere either. So I think you've got a nice little group there, I should say. Jeremiah Ledbetter, the Jaguars really like him. They had him around last year. He's listed ahead of Deshaun Dixon at the other defensive end spot behind Foley Fatukasi. It'll be interesting to see how many of these interior defensive linemen the Jaguars keep, because last year they did go very light on the interior defensive line. How is that going to shake out this year? At this point, it would look like Ledbetter is on the inside and Dixon's probably on the outside looking in. We'll see how all that plays out. But the Jaguars did elect to go light up front in 2022. Will they do the same in 2023? I'm not sure. Gregory Jr. and Buster Brown both listed ahead of Eric Hallett and Christian Braswell. This is like the battle of the late round picks from 2022 and 2023 at corner. You've got Gregory Jr. listed as the number 2 slot corner behind Trey Herndon. And then you've got Buster Brown listed as the number 2 outside corner behind Tyson Campbell. And behind Darius Williams at the other outside corner is Tavon Campbell, a guy who the Jaguars brought in last year. They liked a lot of what he brings to the table. But yeah, so you have Eric Hallett behind Monteric Buster Brown at one outside corner spot. So 3rd on the depth chart there. And then Braswell is also 3rd at nickel behind Gregory Jr. and Trey Herndon. I think this stuff is fluid because honestly, you've seen Hallett play more nickel than Braswell, who's played more outside, and Braswell's been dealing with a little bit of I'm not sure if it's a hamstring, what it is, but he's been working off to the side some. Don't want to speculate on that because I'm not sure exactly what it is. But you have seen Braswell working off to the side. At free safety, obviously Andre Sisco, top of the depth chart. Then you've got Daniel Thomas, then Antonio Johnson. I think it's going to be interesting how the Jaguars decide to shake out the safety room. If I had to guess, they would keep 5, which would be Sisco and Jenkins, the 2 starters, Thomas, Wingard, and Antonio Johnson. I don't think Antonio Johnson's going anywhere. He's been a standout at camp so far. He's been really impressive for them for the most part, and I just don't think that he's going anywhere. He's just way too good to try to stash on the practice squad. A guy that should have been a day 2 pick, quite frankly. How will it shake out at corner? I think that's still wide open. How many corners will the Jaguars keep? I'm not sure. Obviously, you've got Darius Williams, Tyson Campbell, and Trey Herndon locked in. At this point, if they were keeping 6, it would be those 3 plus Tavon Campbell, Buster Brown, and Gregory Jr. I don't think that's going to end up how it plays out. I think Hallett is probably going to make the roster, and I'm not sure how they're going to square that because I do think they like Buster Brown more on the outside, Hallett and Jr. more on the inside. It's going to be interesting. I think they've got some decisions to make there, but they've got more competition on the back end of the roster at corner than they did in 2022. And they've got these guys, all of them have made plays. Like you've seen Buster Brown make plays, Gregory Jr., Eric Hallett. All of them have been able to contribute by disrupting passes, by getting their hands on the football in training camp so far. I think a big factor in this race for the back end of the cornerback room is going to end up being preseason performance, and we'll see how it all plays out. No surprises on special teams as well. Brandon McManus is your starting kicker, Logan Cook your starting punter, Ross Matisic your starting long snapper, and Jamal Agnew at punt return. Now they don't have Parker Washington listed as on the punt or kick return depth chart, Right now, second on punt return is Christian Kirk. Second on kick return is JaMychal Hasty. And then Chris Claybrooks is the third kick returner. I think that's an oversight, quite frankly, because you've seen Parker Washington return the ball a lot. I think you will continue to see that throughout training camp in the preseason. And I'd be surprised, quite frankly, if he's not at least the second string punt returner when the regular season rolls around. But that'll do it for this initial unofficial depth chart for the Jacksonville Jaguars heading into preseason week 1. You can let me know if you have any other further questions about the depth chart, and you can hit me up on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo. Follow Generation Jaguar at Generation Jag. Again, if you're enjoying what we're doing here, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a show. If you want to support the channel further, again, you can check out genjag.com/shop, pick up some new Duval gear. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Have a good one.